Last year was hard and you find yourself blaming yourself. And maybe you were non renewed, maybe you were put on an improvement plan, maybe you had some observations that didn't go so well and you got a lot of feedback on how you need to improve. Maybe you left mid-year or at the beginning of the school year because you realized that this district wasn't aligned with you and you had to leave for your mental or physical health. Either way, I'm here to tell you, you are not that teacher anymore. I know you think that you failed and it was all your fault, but really what happened was a gift to help mold you into the teacher that you are now. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name's Lena, the creator of The Present Teacher, and welcome to this week's content where we're going to be talking about how you're not that teacher anymore and how you can use this new school year as a new chapter, a fresh start to a new you. So, going back to my personal story, when I was in my first year at a district, I had been teaching second grade and like I said, this was my first year in this district. It was a day after school, October. It was nice and cool outside, and I had just gotten done with recess duties, and I was walking back into the school when one of the coworkers saw the look on my face and she said, "Helena, what's wrong?" And in that moment, I felt like she just saw through me. And the last seam that had been holding myself together just came undone, and I just doubled over and burst into tears in front of the school building, not really caring who saw. And that is when I told her that I had to evacuate my classroom 7 times in one day. That was a time in my life where I had a student who was smearing poop in my classroom. And so it was really hard because every time that would happen, we had to evacuate the classroom. Everything would get cleaned up and we would have to come back in. But at this particular day, I had evacuated my classroom 7 times. I felt like I was a failure as a teacher. I felt like I had failed my students and I felt like I had failed that student and I was just terrible at classroom management. And I thought it meant that I was a terrible teacher and I failed at classroom management. But that's when my coworker reminded me, Helena, I've seen you teach. You're a great teacher. You are not your students' behavior. And she didn't realize it then, but what she said to me completely changed how I perceived teaching for the rest of my career. My worth as a teacher isn't measured by how my students act. I realize that I am not my students' behavior. This particular lesson that I had learned with this student, instead of turning it into mean something about me, how I was a terrible teacher, how I had terrible classroom management skills, what I look back and realize now is that particular student and that particular situation taught me that how to advocate for students' need, how to have good classroom management, and when enough is enough and you need outside help. And it's really hard as teachers, and I see it time and time again. We take on the identity of a bad teacher or bad at classroom management when our students act out, and that's just not the truth. The reality is you can't control your students. Granted, you can set them up for success the best you can, but at the end of the day, you're not the one making those choices, your students are. So now that we talked about my story, let's talk about the lie. You are not your past experiences. You are not a bad at classroom management. You are not a non-renewal teacher. You are not a teacher that quit mid-year. We take that on as an identity, but you are not what happened to you. Those are just experiences. And they happened to you, but they happened for you. They didn't just happen to you, they happened for you to help make you the teacher that you were meant to be. And just they aren't a part of you. And somewhere along the way, we take it on as an identity of that means something about me, that is who I am. But we don't define other people by one experience that they had. We don't judge our children for when they fall for the first time as they are someone who falls. We don't judge a coworker when they make a mistake as the teacher who makes mistakes. We label ourselves, but we don't label other teachers. So that experience is not a part of you. It is part of your learning and it is part of turning you into the teacher that you are today. So that is the lie that we often need to shift, is that it's not a part of us, it's something that happened for us. So now that we talked about the lie that we often hear, let's talk about the transformation. Those hard classroom moments built your ability to stay regulated under pressure. When you had bad classroom management or a hard experience with classroom management, that didn't define you as someone who struggles with classroom management. That helped build your ability to stay regulated under pressure. Now you know what it looks like to snap, and you know differently, and you know how to recognize that in your body, and you know how to choose something differently next time. Those lessons that didn't land right, you learned the difference between content that just sounds good on paper and content that actually reaches a child. You've learned the importance of stopping and checking in, checking for understanding before going on and continuing. Those days where you felt depleted and exhausted show you exactly where your boundaries need to be before this year begins. Those days that you took on too much, you said yes to too many, you did too many after school duties, you helped too many teachers, you poured from an empty cup. Those helped you learn that how important boundaries are so you can show up and make the impact you were meant to make with your students. So, in what areas of your life did you see as a weakness? Can you now shift that? And can those now be your new strengths and your new lessons? So, going back to my story, for example, when I struggled with classroom management with that student, it's not I was bad at classroom management. It was that was the turning point in my career where I learned how to advocate for a student, where I learned how important procedures were, how important it was to say enough is enough. We need outside resource and help for the needs of my students. When it comes to maybe bad observations, you're not a teacher who always has bad observations. You've now learned the importance of preparing, of being flexible, of pivoting, of checking in for understanding, of all the important lessons you've learned along the way. So, is it ultimately true? Is it ultimately true that blank happened and I am bad? Is it ultimately true that I had one student who was constantly having us evacuate the classroom, and because of that, I'm a bad teacher? And no, that's not true. Is it ultimately true that because I left mid-year because of a mental health or a physical health, that I'm a bad teacher? Is it ultimately true that I switched districts because it wasn't aligned with me, and therefore I am a bad teacher? No, that is not true. That is not true. Then that would mean that all the teachers in the world who have switched districts, struggled with classroom management, had a student that had them evacuate, would all be labeled as bad teachers. And is that true? No, those are not bad teachers at all. And so, what would be more true if you were to look at things differently is I can use what happened to me for good. For example, my student who had us evacuate the classroom several times taught me how important it was to advocate for my student needs, taught me how important it was to regulate my emotions before responding, taught me how important procedures were to have in place, taught me what advocacy looks like. The district, for example, if I had a district that I switched from, that didn't wasn't something that was terrible for me. If anything, it happened and it taught me that how important alignment is, how important finding a good supportive district is, how important it is to have a supportive team, how to have strong boundaries in place. All of these can be used in your favor. So, is it ultimately true that what happened to you makes you a bad teacher? No, that's not true, because that would mean that all the teachers that ever experienced the similar things that you have are now bad teachers. And that's just not true. What would be more true? I can use what happened to me for good, and it can help me become the teacher that I'm meant to be. So, now that we've talked about shifting in this transformation, let's talk about releasing the old story. So, I want you to imagine all of those old struggles you went through. It could be the evacuations, the students that really had you have to regulate before you responded, the observations that didn't go well, the unaligned district, the non renewal. I want you to imagine all those things that happened to you, and I want you to feel them and and I want you to imagine putting them into your old classroom. Whether that's your classroom that you're still going to have this year or a different one, but I want you to imagine that you're walking into that classroom and you see that old teacher you that went through that. So I'm closing my eyes, I'm imagining my old classroom, and I see the teacher, the version of me who just felt like a failure because she had to evacuate her classroom 7+ times in one day. I see the teacher in me who was told that I had really bad observations as a student teacher. She's in that classroom. I see the version of me that, if I was put on an improvement plan, that was put on an improvement plan. I see that in her too. I see all of those and I see that teacher, and I'm going to go to her and I'm going to say, thank you. Thank you for teaching me. You are not a bad teacher. Those things happened for you, not to you. Thank you for the lessons. Thank you for what happened to me. Thank you. Now, I want you to take that teacher with you, take those lessons with you. Think about all the good that came from it. I learned how to advocate for my students deeply since then. I've learned what alignment in a district looks like. I've learned how good classroom management looks and feels like in my classroom. So I'm imagining all those lessons. And they are done. They are done. They are done. They are done. Those lessons are done. What I needed to learn, it's done. It's over. It's finished. It's done. Now, I want you to imagine that you are taking those lessons with you. You are going to the door and you're taking your old version of you and you're closing that classroom door for good. You are locking that identity, that piece of you away, the part that you had attached, and you are just closing the door for the rest of your life. You're closing that chapter like starting a new chapter in a new book. It's done, it's over, it's finished. And now you're going to walk away from that door and never look back. You take the lessons, you took the positives, you took how it helped shape you into who you are today, but you are releasing it and letting it go because it doesn't mean anything about you anymore. It's just something that helped you along the way learn what you needed to learn. So, this is a new year and a new classroom. Even if it's the same classroom where all those experiences happened, I want you to go into your new classroom with a fresh perspective, with fresh energy. This is no longer a classroom that has those old stories where I hold that old identity. It is now a fresh start, a new chapter. I want you to imagine like a whiteboard and you're wiping it clean, the dry erase mark. It's done, it's finished. This is a new chapter, a new you, a new identity. So now that you release the old story, let's start claiming what era we're stepping into. So I'm stepping into my great classroom management era. I'm stepping into my only working for aligned districts era. I'm stepping into my students help me run my classroom era. I'm stepping into my always has amazing observations era. What are you claiming now? Who are you now? Remember, the past is gone. We let it go. That classroom, we can never go back, even if we wanted to. The door is closed. We took the lessons, we took what we needed, and we left it there. We left the past behind. We took what we needed, the value, and we're here now. What is this new chapter? We're in a new chapter, a new whiteboard. We've wiped it clean. What era are we stepping into? What's done is done. So when you think back and that little voice that reminds you, oh, but back then, you're going to say thank you. Thank you for what you taught me. Thank you for the lesson that I learned. Thank you for showing me what good advocacy looks like. Thank you for showing me what staying regulated looks like. I learned how important it was to XYZ. I learned what it's like to have to advocate for a student. I learned what it's like to have really good classroom management skills. I forgive the past and I acknowledge that I did the best with what I could back then. I release you. So thank you. I learned, I forgive, I release. Walk through that whenever that comes up for you to fully let go of the past and recognize that this is a new chapter. So As a recap, we did talked about several things. So first, we talked about my personal story, what I had gone through, and how I had wrapped up my identity into this teacher who struggled with classroom management because I had a student who had us evacuate 7 times in one day, but I realized that doesn't mean anything about me. My students' behavior doesn't define my worth as a teacher. I can set them up for success, but at the end of the day, they have to decide what kind of student and the choices they're going to make. I can't take that on as my identity. Then we talked about the lie, how we often take our past experiences and turn it into our identity on who we are now. Then we talked about the transformation. How can we transform that lie? How can we transform the old identity that we had into a fresh new start? We talked about how can I see things differently? Is that ultimately true? We talked about visualizing leaving all of the past stories and the past identities behind in your old classroom, shutting the door and never looking back again. We talked about stepping into your new era. What does that look like? Who do you claim to be now? Who are you going into this new school year to be now? And we talked about what's done is done. We can't go back. All we can do is thank the past, recognize what we learned, forgive ourselves, and release it. So, I hope you found this week's content helpful. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe wherever you're tuning in from. Send me a DM to let me know what you thought of this week's content. Just as a quick wrap up, you are not the old you. You're not her, you're not them, you're not that person anymore because you've learned so much since then. This year is going to be different. This is a new chapter, a new era, a fresh start because you're different now. You've learned now. You've grown now. You are not the same person you were back then. You can thank the past and move forward with your life. And if you want to dive further into setting up for the new year, I have a couple places that you can check out. First, if you want the first 10 steps to setting up your classroom for a fresh new start into the new year, make sure to check out my free classroom setup guide. It's got my first 10 steps to setting up your classroom for an easy, relaxing summer and feeling refreshed and renewed for the new year. If you want to take a step further and you want to see all the templates that I use to set up my classroom and help my classroom run smoothly, particularly how I get my students to help me run the classroom by the end of the first quarter, make sure to check out my classroom setup bundle. It has things like classroom procedure slides, meet the teacher slides, meet the teacher newsletters, Super Improver Walls. It has a lot of different templates that I use and different themes, so make sure to go check that out. If you want to take it a step further and you really want to start this new school year with fresh energy, make sure to check out the Poolside Teacher. It is my 14-day experience I am doing to help walk you through how to set up your classroom for success over the summer in just 14 days. My favorite part is I'm doing it for $14 and 14 days. Yes, for $1 a day, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to set up your classroom. We're going to walk through things like not only how to set up your classroom with design and flow in mind to help minimize distractions and disruptive behaviors, but we're also going to talk about things like how to organize your digital and physical assets to cut back on the time it's going to take you to plan and prep throughout the year. We're going to talk about how to plan the first 2 weeks of the school year so that way you're ready to go. And then also how you can prepare for family night. But we're also going to talk about classroom management. What does it look like to get your students to listen to you those first 2 weeks of school and the foundation to having really strong classroom management during those first 2 weeks of school? So if you would like to join us, we would love to have you. Make sure to check out in the description down below. As always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye.